Forces.
Hey,
How's it going?
it's going okay. How you doing?
Not bad. How's the tour gone?
Yeah. You know, the minute you get out of London, it gets better and better. No, we've had some good gigs. Actually, Whitley Bay was great, and Dublin was incredible. Dublin was probably one of the best gigs we've done all year.
Right.
The crowd there were
Pretty intense, aren't they?
Yeah, it was really good. Whitley Bay was great. Glasgow was okay, not as good. I think Whitley Bay was the best one in England so far, and then Dublin was the best one in outside of England.
Oh, great. No, because everyone's been raving about the London gigs.
Huh?
Everyone's been raving about the London
Oh, yeah?
gigs. And having
No, yeah. I mean, I think that we at the London shows. I mean, you know, it's the usual thing. I think we played about as good as we could. We just like when you don't get a lot back from the audience, especially the second night. The second night was more fun for us because we had like Animal from the MC Nowhere League came up on stage, and we did a couple of different things and stuff like that. But we didn't get a lot of energy back from the crowd. So it's like when you get a lot of energy back from the crowd, it can lift the whole gig to like another level of intensity. You know what I mean? And where you get a lot of stuff back from the crowd, and then you spew it back out at them and stuff like that. But you know, I thought the London shows went good for London shows. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially when we played Wembley in June of 1990, it was like, what the hell's wrong with this place? Then that was before we really kind of knew about what it's like to play at Wembley and stuff like that. So this time around we were like a bit more aware of it, and so I thought both of them went really well, considering they were London. You know, everybody came to us afterwards and said, "Oh, we'd never seen a crowd at Wembley, go that wild and so on." So I thought it was very successful.
Oh, great. Anyway, we've got to guide you through Metallica's career, because this is a retro feature.
Oh no! Oh no! I was having such a nice day.
If you can cast your mind back, let's go through a few early questions. Is it true that the original name for Metallica was intended to be Thunderfuck?
That was one of the ones that were being thrown around. Yeah, I had a great drawing that a friend of mine did, named Tony Taylor, who actually was a guy down from Reading who did this drawing, and he put the word Thunderfuck above it, and that was definitely one of the earliest contenders. Another early contender was Hell Driver. Remember that Accept song on the first Accept album called Hell Driver? And we kind of borrowed it from that one. But so Hell Driver and Thunderfuck were the two main contenders that I had, and then James had this Leather Charm thing, and I think the band he was in right when me and him hooked up was a band called Leather Charm that had recorded like a real early version of Hit the Lights that had like James's lyrics to Hit the Lights and like one of the guitar riffs in it and stuff like that. But I think they were called Leather Charm, but we kind of compromised on Metallica.
Do you reckon you'd have got as far as you have today if you'd have been called Thunderfuck?
One can only speculate.
Right. Now Metallica got...
I think it's a great combination of words, though. It sounds really good. Maybe we'll have a song one day called that.
Maybe you should do a couple of secret gigs under that name if anyone turns up. Metallica got together, didn't they, because you needed a band to fill a slot on Brian Slagel's Metal Massacre album.
Well, I mean that's a little misleading, but if you really look at the big picture, I mean, sure.
You wanted to form a band.
Yeah, I mean the long story. Yeah, the long story is the short version of the long story is I was looking basically from about January of '81 to form a band with other people. I went through various mutations and people and idiots and so on for about 6 months, up till about July of '81 when Motorhead came through Southern California for like the last couple of weeks of June and the first couple of weeks of July. Then on July 10th or something like that, I just got so fed up with trying to get a band together in LA. I just said, fuck this, and I went to England on this famous trip in search of all these bands I was so in awe of, and I ended up down at the Woolwich Odeon on July 10th, where Diamond Head were playing, and then I basically spent the next 3 months in Europe just brown-nosing and following bands like Diamond Head and Iron Maiden and Motorhead and all that around. And then in October, I went back to L.A., and I was really inspired, especially by staying with Sean and Brian from Diamond Head for a couple of months to get a band together. And then one of the guys, then two things, then Brian Slagle told me that he would give me a spot on this album that he wanted to put together if I could get a band together. And I kind of used that as a little bit of a selling ploy. So I called up this guy that I'd met back in April or May, who I was pretty impressed with for some godforsaken reason, named James Hetfield, this, little spotty kid who was very shy, but we still had some kind of vibe there. And I called up and said, look, this friend of mine wants to give us a spot on this album if we get a band together. You want to give it another go? And that was in about mid-October of '81, and we gave it another go, and that was it. That was a very abbreviated version.
You knew Slagle through the New Heavy Metal Review, didn't you, which was your fanzine?
Yeah. The short version of that story is I moved to America in August of 1980, and would proudly wear my Saxon and my Iron Maiden and my Motorhead T-shirts and stuff like that up to school and to gigs and stuff like that. And everybody would look at me like I came from another fucking planet, But I was up watching Michael Schenker group at the country club up in Reseda, I think the week before Christmas of 1980. And this guy comes up to me. I had a Saxon T-shirt on. He goes, "Wow, Saxon! I've heard of them." And no, everybody else was walking around in fucking Journey T-shirts, But I had a Saxon shirt on. So this guy came up, and we started, talking. And he knew a bunch of the European stuff like that. And his name was John, and he had a friend whose name was Brian, who had this magazine and was really heavily into the whole tape trading thing and stuff like that. And we went over to his house a couple days later, and that's how me and Brian got started as friends.
How did you get into hard rock in the first place? Was it when you were in Denmark or when you moved up to America? Or?
No, it was when I was in Denmark. It was, growing up in Denmark, age 72, 73, being, 10, 11 years old, listening to all the stuff, the kind of poppy stuff on the radio, like The Sweet and Slade and Gary Glitter and Alvin Stardust and all that kind of stuff were my first memories. And then in 1973, this other famous story was my dad had some tickets to this Deep Purple concert in Copenhagen, and one of his other hippie friends couldn't make it. So I was like 10 years old. They dragged me along to see Deep Purple. This was the last tour they did with Gilla and Glover. It was like February '73. And I went and saw it, and I was really impressed. The biggest band up in Denmark up through the late '70s was Thin Lizzy.
Yeah.
So it was Thin Lizzy and also Rainbow were like the biggest bands, and then like '78, '79, Judas Priest, UFO, and so on. And then I moved to America in 1980, just when things started happening in England with Iron Maiden and Def Leppard and Saxon and so on.
Right. Now, James, when I spoke to him after the Wembley show, was pretty insistent that you were quite an AOR fan when he first met you.
Bullshit.
A quote here from the interview that I did with him said, meanwhile Lars was playing all his Sticks and Foreigner stuff, and I'd be going through his collection nicking all the Motorhead and various singles, but I couldn't believe he had all this AOR shit. If it was in my collection, I'd have fucking freaked.
Yeah, right. I think all the light beer he's drinking is going to his head.
Right.
No, I mean, I basically introduced him to all, he was listening to Ted Nugent and stuff, and Aerosmith, and I think he'd just about heard of Iron Maiden. There was this famous Iron Maiden poster that appeared in a lot of record stores in America that a lot of kids the American kids could look at the pictures and go, wow, look at this picture of Iron Maiden headbanging. And then everybody would just about heard of Iron Maiden, some of the real kids that were like trying to get into it, but he would come over to my house all the time and we'd sit and listen to all these fucking obscure singles, from Gaskin to fucking Hollow Ground to, all this stuff and he would like sit there and like make tapes of all of it, and then, I don't think he'd ever heard Saxon. I think he might have heard Motorhead, but I don't think he liked Motorhead. He was really into, I think Iron Maiden was as far as he'd gotten. Most of the American kids at that time couldn't really deal with like the scruffier side of, Saxon and Motorhead. And I remember the first time I played Venom for Dave Mustaine, he almost shit himself.
That's roughly what James said as well, that Mustaine was a bit freaked by all of the real heavy stuff that you'd be playing.
Yeah, I mean, especially, like I said, but there was something also about, because at that time still, I think that was why Iron Maiden kind of became the forerunners really quickly in America, was because there was something about the way that, I'm saying, like Saxon and Motorhead and all this, it was really scruffy and really dirty and all that kind of stuff, but Iron Maiden kind of had a little bit more of just a cleaner, do you know what I mean? They were a little more like Judas Priest, a little more sleeker, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was easy for the kids to sort of, if you looked at a picture of Iron Maiden versus Motorhead, everybody would go, oh, Iron Maiden, because this was still, when, I'm talking about L.A., when everybody that were playing heavy metal was still very sort of clean, very, sort of had to be good looking and all this kind of crap still,
See, while you're on this, I've got to offer you your chance to reply against another of James's allegations. When I asked him what his
I'm so used to these, I get quite bored with them, actually.
what his first impressions were on meeting you.
Let's see, now he's told you the famous story of the cymbal stand falling over.
He said he was a stinky, smarmy kid. He stunk lots, man. I remember I'd be in his room and he'd be blasting stuff while he was in the shower, and he'd get out and he would still fucking stink. I'd be like, hey man, don't you use soap or what? We have soap in America. My first impression was that he smelled very badly. Your chance to reply.
Well, I'm a true European at heart, right? Which I'm sure that you can relate to. Washing was never one of my favorite pastimes. I was too busy having a good time with other things. America still at this time, in Los Angeles, I remember the school I went to, everybody was wearing, pink Lacoste t-shirts, and it was all measured in the size of your biceps and so on. You know what I mean? It's like if you had like a chest that kind of protruded a little bit, you were more in with the chicks and all that. And it was like, fuck that. I was just walking around in the same Iron Maiden shirt, week after week, and all these guys in their pink Lacoste shirts and their green pants, they had this look of horror on their face. So I was actually quite proud to kind of stand out.
So when James Hetfield turned up the first time at your house, he had this pink Lacoste t-shirt on, did he?
Not quite, but he still had, he was really, really, really shy.
Yeah?
It took him, I think, probably 4 or 5 years, if you remember all the early videos and stuff like that, and listen to all the, Dave Mustaine would do all the raps, between the songs, because James was too afraid to walk up to the mic and say anything, and Mustaine was really kind of like the front man when it came to that. James was a singer, but Mustaine was the front man. Do you know what I mean? He would do all the raps, and Mustaine was such an outgoing character, and a lot of just fun. He was like really outgoing, really easy, very easy among people and stuff like that. And James was incredibly shy. He also had a really bad acting problem at the time, which I don't think really helped his confidence a lot. But I don't think it was really till we got over to Europe and supported Venom in '84 that he started kind of, when he saw the reaction that we were getting from the European crowds and stuff like that, he started getting a little bit more confidence. Do you know what I mean? But you gotta remember that, I'm getting allegations here of not washing, but this is coming from a man who, in the first publicity shot of Metallica, wore leopard striped gloves and a black, I remember clearly, a black and purple striped t-shirt that was all cut up. It looked like something one of the guys in Rat would have thrown away. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm actually quite proud to have stunk that bad. Then if this is coming from a man who wore leopard-spotted gloves, you know. So.
Oh, dear. Right, Hit the Lights, the track on Metal Massacre, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which basically was you and James.
It was me and James. I played the drums, he played the rhythm guitars and the bass, and we had this guy named Lloyd Grant, this guy from Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
We used to call him the Black Shanker. We had him play the lead. He was an incredibly gifted guitar player, but I mean, he couldn't play rhythm guitar to save his life, but he could play lead guitar. It was incredible.
Mm.
And he played the solo, and James sang,
right,
in quotation marks.
How did it feel? I mean, that was it. You got your band and you were on record immediately.
How did it feel?
You must have been pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that you'd actually somewhat written a song and had recorded it. And I just remember the fact that the first time you stood there and actually held a fucking, you were on vinyl. Do you know what I mean? I mean, this is obviously before CDs or anything, and just standing there and you were on vinyl. That was a pretty big moment. It was pretty cool. Except they'd spelt our name wrong on the cover.
Yeah.
There was 2 T's in Metallica, and so that was that took some of the enthusiasm away from the very first moment of standing there with holding yourself on vinyl, and then the fucking name of the band was spelt wrong. But you know, I guess you can't have everything when you're just at that level.
Right. Now, I mean, the first sort of acknowledged Metallica lineup was yourself, James, Dave Mustaine, and Ron McGovney, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna use the word real, that was the first. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Probably, yeah, the first real lineup. Yeah. Or the first lineup that lasted more than 24 hours. You know?
I mean, Ron was kind of in and out of the band, but never 100% into what you were doing.
He was pretty much in the band for all of '82. I think it was just me and James that felt that he was not like permanent. I thought he felt that he was pretty in there. I mean, I don't know. He was kind of very conservative, and I don't mean that specifically in a bad way, but he was just not the kind of guy. I'm not sure that he was ready to make the commitment and take the chances and do the kind of things that you had to do to sort of make that kind of a full-time thing. Do you know what I mean? He had his little job and his little house and his little so on, and I think he was kind of, I'm not sure he was ready to just sort of completely go for it, and I think we could all sense that. So we, then, when we saw this guy Cliff at this show with, it was San Francisco Bay Area night, then it just became apparent that maybe we should sort of try and get this guy in our band.
Now, by the time Cliff was in the band, you'd relocated to San Francisco, hadn't you?
He's jumping a little. Cliff would only join. We tried to pursue Cliff to get in the band for about 5 months, and we first started pestering him in September, and by January we finally got him.
Right, now, when you went to meet Johnny Z, this was the infamous trip that resulted in Mustaine leaving the band, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the journey out to the East Coast in like March of '83 when we finally, convinced Johnny that we should come out there and play some shows, and we wanted to get out and travel and stuff like that. And then we basically threw all our equipment in a truck and drove out to New York. And that was about a week trip, and we had some incidents with Mustaine on the way there that were really not very pleasant. And it kind of showed us for the first time, wait a minute, this is a situation that could potentially just kind of get a little silly, put us in some situations, not so much within the band, but the way that, we were, dealing with people around us and stuff like that, and the way he was dealing with some of the people around us and stuff like that, it just got a little much. So we said, so you know, it's like we had just come out to see Johnny C and so on. It's like the first thing, it's like, hi, nice to see you. We're ready to play gigs, except we want to send our guitar player home. So that was a nice shock. Yeah.
I mean, what was the actual sort of incident when Mustaine was given his marching orders somewhat unpleasant, or was it sort of like, oh, okay, I'm off?
Well, we were in a situation because we had all these gigs lined up that we couldn't really sort of tell him in advance. We had to kind of tell him right when he was going to get sent home. Also, we were, I think, a little, you know, he was so unpredictable that it was like, really didn't know, you know, if we like told him and then we would keep him around for a couple of days, he might run after us with fucking, you know, meat cleavers or something. I mean, seriously. So it was like, okay, we played a gig, and the next morning we booked him on a bus home, and we had this guy named Kurt flying in the same afternoon. So the famous morning when we woke, we walked into where he was sleeping, and kind of me, James, and Cliff were there, and we kind of woke him up. And I was the one that was definitely closest with him at the time. So, you know, I didn't, you know, want to say it. And James, Cliff was the newest one in the band, so he didn't want to say it. So me and Cliff kind of pointed to James and said, "Well, looks like you get to do the dirty deed." So, we all sat around and we woke him up, and well, you're out of the band. You're going back to California in like half an hour or something like that. And then he kind of looked at us, you know, and he said, "Well, I don't know what to do. Should I jump out the window or what?" And then we packed his bags for him, and we took him down to the bus station, and he was sitting on a bus before I think he knew what even hit him.
Right.
I mean, in retrospect, it was maybe a pretty dirty way of doing it, but I think that we were genuinely, I mean, he was so unpredictable back then that it was generally the most safest way for us to do it, because we didn't know if he was going to, you know, fucking trash all the equipment. I mean, there were so many things that could have happened, you know what I mean? It's easy to sit 11 years later and say, well, that wasn't a very nice way of firing somebody, but I remember there was a genuine worry about what would happen if we let him know too far in advance, do you know what I mean?
Right, now, obviously, that Kurt pretty much lined up. You've been listening to the Exodus tapes, and you knew that when or if Mustaine went, this is the guy you wanted in.
Hang on a second. We just need to figure out what we're doing here. How long do we need to talk for?
Well, I don't know. How long have you got? Because I can make this really quick.
Well, it's just that. Do I have another? I have another interview lined up with that French newspaper, right? Okay. Okay. Well, can you find out if that's coming through, or what's the story? Go ask Tony. Okay. I mean, I'm supposed to do a history with this guy. I'm at 1983 still. Do you know what I mean? And I have to be on stage in 2 hours. So, I mean, how? Will you go knock on Tony's door? We're going to interview with the biggest I'm going to interview with the biggest newspaper in France.
Right. Well,
and so, you know, we could talk a little more, and then maybe we could continue tomorrow or something.
Yeah, I mean, I can pretty much rush through this if you want. I mean, basically what I'm doing, I'm interviewing you and James and combining the two into one feature.
Okay.
So...
Or we can just continue on, and then maybe we can... I don't want to rush through it, because if you're doing a whole retro, but if, you know, maybe we could finish it off tomorrow or something.
Okay, well, what time have you got to get off?
Well, that's what, right now, I was supposed to do an interview with this French newspaper at 5:30, but maybe they're running behind too, I don't know, so let's just keep going.
Okay. Well, you had Kirk lined up.
Well, we had Kirk, we had heard, you know, him from the Exodus days, and I'd heard what he played like and stuff like that, and basically took a gamble with him, and we didn't have any money back then or anything like that, but we flew him out. We flew him we flew him out to play with us, and basically gambling on the fact that he would be the guy that would work, and if he hadn't worked out, we were really in deep shit. But we'd heard all the tapes of him play and had done a couple of gigs with him at Exodus back in '82 in San Francisco, so we were pretty hopeful that it would, yeah.
Right. Now, obviously it worked out. And how long was it after that you got a record deal?
We already had the record deal. I mean, we were gonna go do a record for Johnny Z.
Right.
We were gonna do that in May. This was in, I think Mustaine went home the first week of April of 1983, and we went into the studio about a month later in mid-May.
Right. Now, by 1984, Kill 'Em All had come out.
Kill 'Em All came out in August, yeah.
Did you realise quite what you were going to start when you did that album?
Stupid question is that? Of course not. I mean, we just, I mean, we just made. I mean, basically, we all the records we've made have been very, very chronological. Kill 'Em All was basically the first 10 songs that we'd written, or whatever, and we'd already written 4 or 5 new songs. Fight Fire and Fade to Black and Creeping Death, that kind of stuff. But I was very adamant about being very chronological. The first album should feature the first 10 songs. The next album should feature the next 8 songs. I mean, what's the point of writing a song that wasn't going to be good enough to go on your album? Do you know what I mean? So basically, Kill 'Em All was just the first batch of songs that we wrote, and obviously it had these different influences and these some very traditional heavy metal things fused with some very kind of punk attitudes and a little bit of Motorhead and a little bit of this X Factor or whatever thrown in there, and just it ended up sounding very, very different than anything anybody had ever heard come out of America. And I mean, of course, we weren't consciously trying to either start anything or do anything. We were just doing what came natural to us, and off we went. Hang on a second. I want to leave for the show at 6:15. Why? What's the story on the other one? Yeah. Okay. Well, have you talked to the French newspaper?
Yeah.
Sorry about all this. I think we got this French newspaper that James is not feeling too well. He was supposed to talk to him now, and then I was supposed to talk to him afterwards. James blew him out, so I should really talk to him in about 5 or 10 minutes. So maybe we could finish this off. If we talk for another couple minutes, then finish it off tomorrow or something.
Okay, that'd be cool.
Okay.
Right. How do you look back on Kill 'Em All now?
Well, I mean, there are 2 distinct different ways of answering that. I mean, when we did it, and as with any album we've ever done, and you probably heard me say this before, is that whenever you walk into a recording studio and make a record, or at least when we do, you do your best effort, with whatever resources are available, both creatively and financially and so on. And I mean, when we walked out of that studio with Kill 'Em All, we were, I think, as happy as we could be. We'd made a record, and we were a real band with a real record. There was, the money kind of ran out pretty early, and we had some incidents when we were mixing the album that were pretty ugly. Like, the quote-unquote producer, and I use that word very loose terms, wouldn't let us into the studio when they were mixing the record, because if we came in with opinions that differed from theirs, then it would push the project into overtime and so on. So I remember clearly, we were me and James were standing outside the studio door, knocking on the door, and they would get on the intercom, and you could hear them in there mixing a song, and they basically told us to fuck off and stuff like that. So that wasn't too happy. But I mean, when all was said and done, we had a fucking record. We had vinyl, and we were like pigs and shit,
Yeah.
And I mean, how do I look back on it when I listen to it nowadays? It obviously sounds a bit green, but I mean, unlike a lot of other people in the music business, I'm not going to sit here and denounce what we did. I mean, it was the best that we could do with the resources that we had, and I use, when I say creative resources, I mean that. I mean, it was, all James's lyrics were sort of watered down Rob Halford lyrics, about, the leather armies will prevail, and all this, metal militia stuff and no remorse and all that kind of crap. But I think, the major turn that we took creatively was between that album and the next album. But Kill 'Em All, I mean, it had a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of honesty, and it was just four guys really wanting to get the funk going and do things in a very stubbornly steadfast way, which was their own.
Now, it was hailed as a pioneering album within something that the press were to call the thrash metal movement. Do you ever perceive yourselves as part of that movement? Because to me, Metallica have never been a thrash band, they've just been a heavy metal band.
Well, I think we've always had a lot more, musically in common with bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. I mean, more more hard rock, heavy metal bands. I mean, thrash. It's funny when I had these discussions. Where does that term come from? Was it Xavier Russell? Was it Malcolm Dome? I mean, who the fuck can remember what was it supposed to actually mean? I don't know. When that album came out, a lot of people were saying they'd never really heard anything like it. And but then again, I don't really think it was that musically different from what some of the more left field bands in the new wave of British heavy metal were doing. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so it's, I don't know. I mean, the press just kind of, especially the English press, probably more so than anybody else, just put this tag on us, thrash metal, and that was it. And we were kind of stuck with that. And for a while, it didn't really bother me. It wasn't until much later when we started really, I think, expanding our musical horizons up around lightning and puppets and stuff like that, where we're still stuck with this very one-dimensional tag, that it really started bothering me. But back in 83, 84, I really didn't give a fuck what people called us, as long as they called us something, because that meant that we were getting attention. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, you got more attention initially from Europe, didn't you, than
America? I mean, because basically that was down to the law of physics, that in Europe, because the independent label scene was so much more thriving than in America, you could sell tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of records being on an independent label in Europe and go out and tour and stuff like that, whether that was pretty much impossible in America. So we kind of did, focus most of our attentions on Europe, and we got more of a reaction in Europe. I mean, we still got a lot from the underground people and stuff in America, but in terms of touring and in terms of selling records and stuff like that, initially, like most of 1984 was basically spent in Europe, and that's where we seemed to get most of our positive feedback. I think we should leave it at that for right now, because I really, this other thing is like the biggest newspaper in France,
cool.
And I really should jump on them.
Okay, then.
But can we, does Tony have your home number?
I can give you my office number if you want to give it to him.
Did you call Tony today?
Yeah, I called Tony. Oh, I actually got through to Ian, so...
Okay. Well, why don't you call Tony now, and just, we'll try and reschedule it for sometime tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, what's Tony's room number?
1209.
1209, okay, I'll try give him a call.
And then we'll finish up tomorrow.
Brilliant. So, what do you remember about that first European tour?
We were out supporting Venom, who we were all big fans of at the time, and it was their first tour, and it was pretty cool. It was, touring in Europe was pretty different than touring in America. In America, when, back then, all the excesses and all the kind of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll aspect of touring was a lot more alive and well in America, and we kind of came over to Europe, and it was like, we had done some tours in America, and you gotta remember, this is when we were like 19 and 20, and we were running around and drinking bottles of vodka a day, and if it had a heartbeat, we were there and all that kind of stuff. But so you come over to Europe, and the reality of the different sides of touring in Europe kind of hit you. But we still had a lot of fun, a lot of drinking, a lot of just over the top shit happened all the time. But I remember we were really, really blown away about how great the gigs were and how much the kids, we'd never played to thousands and thousands of people, and it's like we would play, 4,000 or 5,000 people and stuff like that, opening for Venom, and I think we gave them a good run for their money, and it was also cool to see how many kids knew all our shit, playing, we'd never been exposed, you go up and play in Holland, and you'd never, when they start doing all these football chants and all this stuff, we'd never heard anything like that, so it was really cool.
Right. So, you really enjoyed it then?
Well, yeah, yeah, sure.
Did you find it? I suppose, I don't know, I've never been
I think we also got a lot more confident on that first European tour because we, like I said, especially James, I think started being a little more confident as a front man and kind of not running and kind of hiding in between songs back, behind the drum kit or something like that and letting somebody else do all the raps. I think he kind of got a little more, got some newfound confidence and stuff on that tour.
You stayed in Denmark, didn't you, at the end of the tour?
Well, the theory was that back then, because obviously money was so sparse, that we wanted to record the album in Denmark, but instead of going back and forth and stuff like that, we just basically stayed mainly in Europe for like the first 8 months of that year, recorded the album, kept touring. We did a tour, a little European tour with Twisted Sister, where we did some co-headlining dates with them, and we kind of just stayed in Europe. I think in 1984 we played like one show in America or something like that. We kept pounding it out in Europe, and we had a lot of success here. The album Music for Nations were great. They were really pushing the album, and things were really rolling along, and we played some good festivals. We played the Heavy Sound Festival in Belgium and the Breaking Sound Festival in Paris and stuff and things were really rocking along. And we had like a real booking agent here. We had like a record company who were really looking after us well and stuff like that. And in America, things just because we weren't on an independent label and stuff like that, things were just at a lot smaller level, So we really had a good year in Europe in 1984. The only gig, funnily enough, that we actually played in America in 1984 was at the Roseland in New York on August 3rd. And that's when this guy from Elektra came and saw us and basically wanted to sign us, and that was also when this guy named Cliff Bernstein and this guy named Peter Mensch started hearing about us and stuff like that. So at the only show that we actually played in America, everything kind of also went to the next level in terms of the record company and the management company and so on.
Now, when you recorded Ride the Lightning, were you with Q Prime, or did that come after the album?
That came after.
Right, okay. So you stayed in Denmark to work on the second album. Now, you stayed at Ken Anthony's place, didn't you?
Yeah. We had 6 of us sleeping on his floor. Yeah, that was, I don't think Ken has quite ever recovered from that, but I think the apartment is still being deloused and so on as we're speaking. But, back then, it was cool. Fuck, that was what we were used to, and we had fun doing it, and the story. It was no worse than today or no better than today. We were, things were cool. We were just happy to be doing what we were doing, and that was it.
So, and Fleming Rasmussen, producer and an engineer, was the guy that you hooked up with to work on Ride the Lightning.
Yeah, he'd done a lot of Rainbow stuff and a lot of
Pretty Mates.
Yeah, big sounding records had been recorded at that studio, and we just were really interested. There was some really good sounds coming out of it. We really wanted to. I think we realized that we were not the kind of band that really needed to be produced much, but we wanted to be more. We just needed to kind of be recorded and sort of help with sounds and making big sounding records and so on.
Ride the Lightning certainly was a big sounding record.
For the time, yeah.
Even listening now to Metallica records in chronological order, the step up from Kill 'Em All to Ride the Lightning is still quite large.
Yeah, but there were so many factors. I probably told you yesterday, Ride the Lightning was the next 8 songs, and what had happened was we got Cliff and Kirk in on the songwriting, and they'd added like a whole new element to the whole thing, you know. So we really wanted to try and kind of just keep doing what we were doing, but also kind of expand our musical horizons quite a bit. And I think we did that.
You did. I mean, it was stuff like Creeping Death, or For Whom the Bell Tolls. Outstandingly mature songs for a band's second album.
Yeah, they actually hold up quite well today too.
Well, I mean, Ride the Lightning is my favourite Metallica album, followed by the latest one.
Cool.
So, now, how was Ride the Lightning received in America by the press and the fans?
Well, in America, it was received, I think, really good. I think there was some people in Europe that had, you know, you could tell in the press and stuff like that in Europe that, oh my God, Fade to Black, you know, Metallica's doing a ballad, it's all over, you know. So you could tell there was already a little hostility to the fact that we were actually broadening our musical, you know, spectrum. But in America, not so many people had heard Kill 'Em All. So, you know, Ride the Lightning didn't really take off in America until, you know, it came out for about 15 minutes on Megaforce, and then Elektra took it over a couple of months later, and then they really started the big push on it and so on, and the word of mouth and stuff started getting really, really, really good on it. It was received very well for a band that nobody knew who the fuck was, basically at that next level up, you know what I mean? And you could just tell that there was some shit going on there was like a kind of a feeling in the air, without sounding too poetic here. I mean, there was a feeling in the air of, I think that a lot of people were realizing that there was some new shit that was starting to happen in a big way in terms of that things were starting to loosen up. People were starting to realize that there was a lot more on offer than just fucking, you know, Journey records, you know, and that I think a lot of the kids were starting to just open up to stuff that was a little more left field, you know.
Yeah. Now, as you said, the album came out on Megaforce, but not for long. You were soon signed to Elektra in America, which broke things even wider for you, didn't it? Because, like you said, the independent scene at the time was small.
Right.
And that was suddenly bang, Metallica out on a big scale.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't something that happened like in 5 minutes. I mean, I'm talking about maybe in the spring of '85 or something like that. It started. The album came out. I think it came out in August on Megaforce. Came out, I think, in November on Elektra, and then, you know, I mean, it was not something that happened in 5 minutes. But
the whole outlook of the company. I didn't mean that Metallica exploded big time, but the push behind Metallica was suddenly big time.
Well, I mean, by today's standards, no, but
back then.
But to what we were used to, obviously, yeah. The fact that you actually had, you know, a real record company and a real manager and a real, you know, people, you know, with IQs of higher than, you know, shoe sizes. I mean, it was, I mean, no offense to Johnny Z, but it was just, you know, it was, you had an organization that was just, you know, were able to pull things off at a higher level than what we were used to, and that obviously was pretty cool. So, you know, but it was still a slow thing. I mean, through all of 1985, Ride the Lightning just kept getting a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger, and we did a lot of touring. You know, we were touring around for months and months with Armored Saint supporting us, and this Wasp thing and all this kind of stuff, and just as we got out more and more, just people just slowly more and more got into it, you know.
Now,
oh, come on, man. I mean, it's just funny. What are you gonna say?
I don't know.
I'm to the point now where it's like, you know, I heard. I haven't seen it yet, but I mean, it's like, you know, I guess Xavier Russell wrote in Kerrang's review today that he was questioning whether we were using backup tapes for the guitars. I mean, give me a fucking break here. So, I mean, it's just to the point where it's like, I mean, what are you going to do except laugh? I mean,
I guess so.
It's just so silly.
Right. Let's get back on with the career. Yeah, I mean, to what sort of level did you
heat down a little here, Gary. Hang on.
Yeah, what sort of a level did Metallica sort of reach with Ride the Lightning?
I think we hit like, I think the album did about 200,000 in America by the time the next one, I mean, now it's on its way to 3 million in America, but I think by the time Puppets came out, it was at like 250 or something like that.
Right. Now, Puppets followed a year later.
Yeah, March 86.
Again recorded with Fleming.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps even more far-reaching and more musically diverse.
Shit. Hang on, now somebody's knocking on the door. I never get a fucking rest. Hang on. Yes? What? So, Puppets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, you know, I mean, Puppets was just a continuation. I mean, there was no real sharp turns or anything. It was just, we finished the Ride the Lightning tour, I think, in April of '85, and then we took about 3 weeks off, I think, and me and James started writing songs, I think, in June. And we wanted to record the album down in L.A. with Fleming and not go back to Denmark, so we actually went down and looked at studios in Los Angeles and stuff like that, and actually found a couple studios that we were really interested in working at. But Peter and Cliff convinced us that because of the way the dollar was against the European currencies, that we could get about 3 times the amount of studio time if we went back to Copenhagen instead of recording in America. So off we went to Copenhagen again in... I think we played Donington and Dan the Green in August of '85, and then we went to Copenhagen about 2 weeks later and started recording. And we're basically there from September up through Christmas of '85.
How did you find that first Donington?
It was great. I was fucking shitting in our pants. I mean, it was the first time we'd obviously ever played in front of a crowd, you know, like that. But it was pretty funny. It was good memories of that. I think it was probably the second best of our 3 Donington performances, and the best one being the last one, and the worst one being the middle one. But hey, I think what that day did, if you look at the big picture, was that for a lot of people, especially some of our musical peers, and for a lot of people, I think Metallica had always been this kind of little band that everybody a lot of people knew existed, not a lot of people knew a lot about. But a lot of people just kind of thought Metallica was this, you know, one-dimensional, just little shitty band that just, for some reason, a lot of the real low-life of the heavy metal kids were buying the records from. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that Donington, we proved ourselves to a lot of musical peers, to a lot of people in the media, and to a lot of fans who didn't know us, that we were actually like a real band that we're actually capable of somewhat playing our instruments, and that we're actually capable of actually writing songs, and that we're actually not just a one-dimensional fucking cement mixer for an hour and a half. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that you know, a lot of people that day say that was in some ways a kind of a turning point, because a lot of people realized that this was a real thing, you know, and it was something that was not just going to go away, and it was not as one-dimensional as everybody had thought it was, you know. I mean, that was always one of the things about Metallica I've found in the last 10 years, is that Metallica has probably been, I can't find a band that has been more misconceived in terms of what people think that they know what Metallica is all about all the time. You know, we had another wave of that, for instance, this year with you know, finally being played on American radio now. You know, you hear stories from DJs I've talked to and stuff like that would say, and they just played, you know, The Unforgiven or Sandman or Rome or something like that, and then somebody would call up and go, "What a great song that was! Who was that?" And then he'd go, "Metallica," and then the guy would go, "No, that could not be Metallica. They're not supposed to sound that good or that, you know, varied or what, you know what I mean?"
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that day at Donington, we killed a lot of that, or was the first step towards killing a lot of those preconceptions about what people had about this band.
I mean, because when you listen back now to Ride the Lightning or to Master of Puppets, and here's this band who are sort of hailed in the press as being the forerunners of the thrash metal movement. And yet these are two incredibly mature and far-reaching musically at least, far-reaching albums that kind of easily transcend what the press was saying about you at the time.
Yeah, it's true. I heard about a couple of months ago. I heard the Disposable Heroes, and I heard Orion, and I heard one other track from it on a radio station somewhere. And you're right. I mean, for what people were saying about us at the time, it's surely a lot more melodic and a lot more varied and stuff like that than just, you know, what you would conjure up when you think of here's the thrash band. You know, I mean, a piece like Orion, I mean, that's something you could find in a fucking Genesis album or something, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, but the stuff on Master of Puppets, like Sanitarium or Battery, Master of Puppets itself, Disposable Heroes, I mean, they wavered. They were really intense and they were very heavy in places, but they were also catchy without being sort of AOR-like melodic, if you know what I mean. They had melody, they had real balls, and yet there was moments of intense subtlety as well.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, what can I say about that?
I mean, did it bother you, or not? Did it annoy you that people would sort of like say, like they did with Ride the Lightning, like Fade to Black? Oh no, they've done about people would get uptight that you do something that stretches your musical ability.
Yeah, that's one thing about being in Metallica is that, I mean, if people, what is that in the background?
This is Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, I've heard of him. Yeah, I'd be lying to you if I said that, you know, that it would never ever get to you, but it, you know, I mean, I think the first day that I met Peter Mensch, he told me one thing, which I still think about a lot of times, and he said, you know, everybody in the press, everybody loves you so much that one day there's going to be a big Metallica backlash. He said that to me like in 1984. And every time we put out an album, right, we'd go, okay, here comes a big Metallica backlash. And then you kind of, you know, you get like one reviewer who's going blah, 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 but then you get like 95% of the other people going, this is fucking great. And then every time you expect some huge kind of backlash from everybody, then it never really happens. But there's always a couple people who'll write a few things, and it's just like, I think if you look at our career for the last 10 years, I mean, we really can't really complain too much about if you look at the overall press scenario, you know, you always get somebody who's pretty clueless. I mean, Mark Rutherford wrote of Kill 'Em All in sound, he gave it half a star, and he said that Cliff's bass solo was a guitar solo and things like that. So, I mean, when he gets to that level, it just becomes funny, you know what I mean? And like I'm saying, when somebody like Xavier Russell today in Coang puts, you know, that Metallica are using backup tapes for their guitars, I mean, that's just funny. That's not really annoying. That's just silly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's I think we've been able to deal with all that pretty well, and it's never really. We're pretty difficult to wind up when it comes.
Yeah.
To most of that stuff, and if somebody thinks that, you know, I mean, I've heard people tell us, you know, oh, we've sold out. I mean, I heard people tell me we were selling out back on Ride the Lightning because Fade to Black was on there, so we got vaccinated against those kind of things pretty early on in our career, if you know what I mean. We're pretty immune to most of that stuff now, believe me.
Now, off you went on tour with Master of Puppets, and
hurry up.
Another successful tour until you were going through Europe, and then tragedy struck you.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, first time anything really, really bad had ever happened to Metallica.
Well, yeah, I mean, whatever has happened to you could never compare to obviously losing a fellow band member. But I think in retrospect, we did the right thing. I mean, instead of sitting there and sinking into the fucking couches and just letting everything get to us and feel really sorry for ourselves, I mean, we actually fucking just, about 2 weeks later, we just kept going and got a fucking bass player and just went straight back out on tour. And by the time the whole thing would start to sink in, then we were already out kind of playing again and working again and keeping our minds occupied and so on, you know.
But, was that not, though, pushing back the inevitable and a little further until it was bound to happen eventually anyway?
What do you mean?
When you tried to sort of like put it behind you and keep on working, but eventually the sort of the what you go through catches up with you at the end. Do you see what I mean?
For me, it caught up with me one night in, you know, Cliff died on September 27th, and we were auditioning bass players again, I think by about October 10th. I think we asked Jason to join the band around October 28th, and we were in Japan playing gigs, I think, November 15th, if I'm not mistaken. I think it never really got to me too bad until there was one night, about 3 or 4 nights into the Japanese tour, where we were all sitting around drinking in the bar. We got really paralytic, and destroyed the fucking bathroom. I mean, we'd never ever done anything, you know, Keith Moonish or you know any of that stuff, but we just went in and tore this fucking bathroom, just broke the mirrors, the tiles, the fucking toilets, the pissers, everything for like 10 minutes. We were fucking bleeding and everything, right? And I think we got it kind of out of our system that night.
Right.
And from then on, it was not something that was building up in you physically. It was just kind of like a mental thing. And from then on, it became more, whenever we would deal with it or talk about it, we were always being like kind of silly about it. And we would always sit and think of the funny things that Cliff used to do and all the kind of goofy stuff that we tried to get across in the Cliff and Mall video and stuff like that, you know?
Right. Which was, James said it was like a chance to get him to try him out with the band in the studio, but not actually sort of write anything. It was sort of like a tester.
I think what the Garage EP to me was it was a chance for us to undertake a project that wasn't as serious and as, I think, energy and time consuming as all the other projects we'd undertaken up till then, which was to make a record that we didn't take as serious as what we've done, as all the songs that we would write ourselves, and actually do something that was a little looser and try and just kind of do something that was just not so serious, you know what I mean? And just, it was like we'd finished the tour, you know, like I said, you know, doing something with Jason and also kind of just going in and just, you know, getting away from this thing about, you know, spending 4 or 5 months in the studio and being all really serious about everything we were doing and all that, and just going in and banging a couple songs out and just kind of going for it really, really loosely in the studio. That was, I think, also kind of the idea.
Now, that and the following album, And Justice for All, were the first 2 things that came out on a major label over here in England on Phonogram.
Yeah.
Now, it's said that Music for Nations offered you a better financial deal to stay on their label than Phonogram offered you, but Mensch wanted you off an independent and onto a major. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta, I'm not sure that is true or not. I wasn't as heavily involved in a lot of that stuff as I am now. You just gotta understand one thing, that there's more to it. There's always more to everything than just the cold cash figures. Do you know what I mean? If somebody says, you know, I'm going to give you 10 pounds, and somebody else says, well, I'll give you 12 pounds. If the guy who gives you 10 pounds is going to give you a much higher royalty rate, or has much better distribution, or has much better setup than the guy who's going to give you 12 pounds up front, but not going to give you anything afterwards. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's, I mean, any, you know, a 3-year-old kid could tell you that it's not just down to, you know, the bare essentials about money and stuff like that, that it has something to do with vibe and trust and so on. And I mean, Martin Hooker and Music for Nations were fucking great, and we had a great relationship with them. There was a guy there named Jim Howard, who we had an incredible relationship with, and I mean, I have nothing bad to say about those guys whatsoever, but I think we really felt that it was time to move on, and that was it. And I think, in retrospect, I'm glad we did, but I'm also glad that we had those, you know, 3 or 4 years with Music for Nations. But I don't think we could have taken it to a level that we're at now if we were still at Music for Nations. End of story.
Now, And Justice for All was the first album to really sort of shift you into the music charts over here. With One, which also had the first promotional video that you'd done and released. Because you had done one previously, hadn't you, that you didn't put out. But it's my least favourite Metallica album of all. It's a bleak, sort of Spartan album. I don't know, I don't like the production sound on it too much. I mean, how do you feel about it now?
It's very bleak. I mean, it's you know, it's the one album where I can see now where we just took it too far. It got too far, it got too progressive, the songs got too long, and blah, blah, blah. But the point is that I just made to this guy who I spoke to half an hour ago also when we were talking about Justice, which is that, it's like you can sit there 5 years later and say blah, 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 but the point is that when we made that fucking record, it was fucking basically what we wanted to do, period. I mean, major fucking period, and that's it. So, I mean, what do you learn? You should never second guess. I mean, that's been like a golden rule of Metallica since day one, is never second guess, what feels right. Don't sit there and go, well, how is so-and-so going to react to it? How are you going to feel about it in 5 years? If it feels right at that point in time, do it. And we just did. And obviously, it's also, for me, probably the album that's aged the least well, but I still am amazed when I hear it. What I'm amazed about is how the playing on it is really, there's some playing on it that's just really, really incredible in terms, I mean, fucking, Bill Bruford or, some of those progressive bands like UK and all that stuff, I mean, they would be proud, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, you know what I mean? It's there's some stuff on it that's really out there, and when I hear it, I kind of chuckle because it's like, I heard on that same radio program a couple weeks ago, no, but it was a couple months ago, I heard, like I told you, I heard like Disposable Heroes and a couple songs like that, and then they also played, I guess it was some radio station that was playing like, the songs you never hear from Metallica anywhere. So they played like Frayed Ends of Sanity, and they played, I think like one or two more from Justice, and I'm just like, I'm sitting here listening to this going, how the fuck could we even remember the arrangements in these songs? I mean, it really baffles me. It's just, it's so far removed from what I'm into right now. But, so, what I find interesting is that just 4 years ago, or 4.5 years ago, that was what made my dick hard, you know what I mean? That was what, that was it for us 4 years ago, and now it's so different. But I mean, it's just like, I guess you never really know when you've crossed the line until after you've crossed it, and it was just like, I think we realized on the Justice tour that we'd gone too far, because what happened was, in a live setting, a lot of these songs just really didn't work as well as we would have liked them to for ourselves and for the audience, and we started realizing that what really was working well for ourselves and the audience was things like, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and some of the simpler stuff like, Whiplash and Harvester of Sorrow, and some of that caper.
Right. So that was 4 years ago. Last year you put out Metallica, which is the biggest selling album of the 90s, is it not so far?
That's what the record company, everybody keeps throwing this line at me. Let me just say that was something that the record company invented, not me. Well, yes, it is. I guess it's sold about 6 million in America and about 3 million in the rest of the world, so it's
certainly the most influential and far-reaching rock album of the 90s so far.
Yeah, I mean, numbers aside and all that shit,
But you copped a lot of flack from the people, I suppose, that gave you the flack for doing Fade to Black.
I think the people that gave us flack for Fade to Black were not even interested in Metallica in 1991.
But rock, I mean, that's that's, most people think the album's great, but the purists got their sort of like, got their backs up because you were working with someone that worked with Bon Jovi and this sort of thing. And
oh no.
And I mean, was this sort of thing dealt with in the same sort of way? You just laughed it off and like, sod it, we make the rules.
Well, you gotta understand one thing, right? Here I am fucking reading these magazines while we're fucking making this record, right? So I'm reading these magazines, these letters from the kids, and it's like, oh my God, Metallica's using Bob Rock, the world is going to end in 7 minutes, you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm sitting here in the studio fucking doing Sad But True and Wherever I May Roam and Enter Sandman and all these things, and knowing at what level this is turning out to be, while so it's like, how else are you going to react to it? You sit there in the studio making something that you know is right, and that you feel is just going to blow everybody's heads off, and whether Bob Rock had done fucking, John Bon Jovi or the Pet Shop Boys or fucking Nuclear Assault. I mean, the point was that he was the right guy for us at that particular point in time. And it's like, so you're sitting there making the record of your fucking life, and you know it's right, and then you read some letters and some media people saying, oh my God, Bob Rock. So it's like, again, I mean, your instant reaction is just to kind of chuckle at it because you know that you're doing the right thing for yourself. And it's just like, obviously people don't know because they haven't fucking heard it yet.
And of course, when they did hear it, massive success, massively successful, huge world tour. You went out on the road with Guns N' Roses. I think the two biggest hard rock acts in the world went out on the road together in America. You're doing this huge European tour as well. I mean,
We're only a week and a half old.
I mean, by far and away up there, probably the biggest hard rock act in the world at the moment. And yet it's the first band that you were ever in.
I know.
It's not bad going, really, is it?
It's the only band I've ever been in. It's kind of frightening. It's like, I just, when this is all over, fuck it, because it's just, I could never put this amount of dedication and energy and emotions and whatever into anything else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like, as much as you sit there once in a while and go, God, it'd be really funny to jam with so-and-so. I mean, it would never be the fucking same, would it? And I'm certainly not, I'm not the kind of musician like some of these people that, your Cozy Powell's who's played on, in 12 different bands or something like that. It's just, I don't know, I'm really into like the whole band thing and the whole kind of, for me, it's a lot more than just playing drums. It's the whole gang mentality and the whole kind of thing of that whole thing. There's, I'm not one of these drummers that fucking jump out the window if I don't have a pair of drumsticks and sit and tap on the fucking table 8 hours a day. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, for me, it's yeah, you're right. I mean, it's the one band, and it's incredible.
Do you ever sit there and sometimes get a bit scared at how big it's all got, or are you just enjoying the ride?
I'm pretty much enjoying the ride. And lately, a couple of times lately, when I've heard the album, the last album, I wondered not so much how we're going to top that musically, because that doesn't worry me, but how we're going to, whatever you say about that Metallica album, the fifth one, if you like it or you hate it or whatever, I don't think, I think the fact that it's probably the greatest sounding heavy metal album of all time in terms of sonically, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And it's like, it kind of frightens me. I'm not really sure how we could ever top that. That kind of scares me a little bit sometimes. I'm not worried about the songs because the songs will always be instinctive. It's just like you'll sit down and write whatever comes to you. So I'm not worried about that whatsoever. But it's just like, how the fuck are we going to make a record that sounds just that good again?
Well, I mean, that's my last question is, what next?
You don't want to go back. You don't want to go and backtrack everything. You don't want to, okay, the drums have to stand in the exact same position in this room, and we have to have the same guy pressing the, I mean, we know we want to work with Bob Rock again. I mean, end of story. But it's just like, can everybody mentally deal with being in the studio for another 11 months? I mean, who knows? So that kind of perplexes me a little bit. Like I said, the songs don't worry me about at all, because I know that when we sit down and write songs in 1994 for Metallica album number 6, whatever me and James come up with will be whatever we come up with, and I'm not worried about that. but like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how you top this one production-wise.
Into the dark unknown, eh?
Yeah, but I'm pretty much just cruising. I think that the last thing that Cliff Bernstein, we had a meeting at the end of the Guns N' Roses thing where, I mean, it's no secret to everybody that it was a financial disaster for everybody and so on. And we're sitting there talking about the whole tour, and Cliff said that the best thing about that tour and the whole thing was that we still were kind of, we still were kind of the underdogs. We were still kind of, we still had kind of not, he didn't believe that we had peaked yet in terms of our creative. I mean, I don't care about the popularity thing because, statistically, people will tell you that you'll never do a record as big as one that sells as many copies as the one that we're doing now, but that we've not peaked yet creatively and so on, that we still, and that's really what's really important. So I think that yes, there's still a while to go, and I think that I think we pretty much set the rules for ourselves when we put Fade to Black on the second album by saying, wait a minute, this is a band that you're never going to be able to predict.
Yeah.
This is a band that you're never going to be able to know what to expect from, and if you buy another Metallica album expecting to hear more of the same, then you don't really know Metallica very well. And so with that kind of train of thought, then I think that whatever we do next, then that will be whatever we do next, and it'll be really exciting because whatever we do next, we know it'll not be what we've done before.
Right.
So that will kind of make it exciting, and that means that in 1994, after we take most of this year off of the last 8 months of 93 into 94, when we take that off, whenever we get it together again in 94, it'll be really fun again because we'll have rested for about a year and we'll be ready to fucking go for it again, and we know that there's still like a lot of creative things yet to be done, and just fucking go for it and see what happens.
Great. Okay, Lars, we're finished.
Okay.